The following presentation is brought to you by Discovery Education, leading the world of digital and video learning. Discovery Education. Connect to a world of learning.
All around us, as well as inside of us, is a magical world that teems with trillions of tiny organisms that are completely invisible to the naked eye. As we will soon discover, the microscopic creatures that inhabit this world carry out important roles in creating and maintaining the balance of nature. The most primitive group of microorganisms are classified into the kingdom Monera. They consist of bacteria and blue-green algae. Monerans, like those seen here, have existed on Earth for over 3.5 billion years. In fact, they were the first life forms to appear on the planet. Of all living things, bacteria are the smallest and most numerous. But bacteria share some characteristics with blue-green algae, meaning they have a very simple cellular structure consisting of a single cell surrounded by a thick cell wall. They have no complex organelles such as mitochondria or chloroplasts. Moneran cells do not have a nucleus because their DNA is not enclosed in a nuclear membrane. And they have only a few hundred genes compared to the tens of thousands found in complex organisms. Under ideal conditions, bacteria grow, replicate their DNA, and split into 2 new organisms every 20 minutes or so. In the natural world, bacteria are the main decomposers of non-living organic materials. In fact, bacteria convert these materials into rich compost by breaking down complex biochemical compounds, thereby releasing nutrients back into the soil so they can be used again by living things. Bacteria can be very tough organisms as well. Certain species thrive in the boiling water of hot springs and in places that have high concentrations of acid, oil, or salt that would easily kill other organisms. Even the human large intestine has a huge population of bacteria that produce a vitamin needed by human beings. But several bacterial species secrete poisonous cell products called toxins that produce sickness in human beings. A few examples of bacterial diseases are anthrax, leprosy, and tuberculosis. Viruses, such as those pictured here, also cause a variety of human diseases, such as AIDS, influenza, and even certain kinds of cancer. Viruses are much smaller than bacteria and can only be seen using a powerful electron microscope. Because they cannot reproduce on their own, viruses are not considered to be living things. Viruses are protein-wrapped packets of genetic information that invade the cells of plants, animals, bacteria, and protists, taking over their cell machinery in order to reproduce. Depending on the type of virus, genetic instructions can be stored either in a double strand of DNA or in a single strand of RNA. The measles virus used in the following example is an RNA virus. Infection begins when a virus attaches itself to the cell membrane and injects its RNA into the cytoplasm. Then the protein coat that surrounds the RNA dissolves. Next, using chemical compounds in the cytoplasm of the host cell, the instructions in the viral RNA are translated into particular enzymes it needs to reproduce itself, that is, to make copies of its RNA. As the process is repeated over and over again, the host cell fills up with viral RNA. After the RNA is surrounded by protein, it takes on a more compact shape and migrates to the surface of the cell. Here, the destruction of the host cell continues because bits of cell membrane are used to make outer coats for the new viruses, giving them added protection so they can go on to infect other cells. The most fascinating creatures that inhabit the microscopic world are those organisms classified into the kingdom Protista, the protists. As is true of certain bacteria, a few protists cause serious diseases. For example, malaria, sleeping sickness, and certain forms of dysentery are all caused by protists. Most protists are single-celled organisms, but some have a very simple multicellular structure. Protists are much larger than bacteria and also have a distinct nucleus that is separated from the cytoplasm by a nuclear membrane. Protists, in particular the animal-like protists called protozoa, also possess a number of specialized cell structures that allow them to perform many complex activities. Locomotion, that is the ability to move about, is very highly developed in protists. Protists basically use any one of 3 different cell structures for locomotion. Perhaps the most common of these are the wiggling hair-like structures called cilia, seen here. Organisms possessing cilia are classified into the protist phylum known as the ciliates. Besides being used for locomotion, many ciliates also use cilia to sweep food into mouth-like openings in their cells. Organisms like the amoeba seen here are classified into a second protist phylum called the rhizopods. These creatures move by extending projections of their cytoplasm known as pseudopods, or false feet, and then pulling themselves along. This unique style of locomotion is called amoeboid movement. A third phylum of protists are the flagellates. These organisms move by wiggling long, whip-like threads called flagella. The flagellate seen here, called a euglena, is an interesting organism because it possesses both animal and plant-like characteristics. Like a plant, the euglena has green-colored chloroplasts that are used to make food by photosynthesis. However, under conditions of darkness, a euglena behaves more like an animal by hunting for and ingesting food. Other features of the euglena that are more animal than plant-like are its ability to move freely about and to sense light with its large red eye spot. The cytoplasm of protists is normally filled with sac-like structures called vacuoles that carry out several important life processes, including digestion, elimination of wastes, and the regulation of the cell's correct osmotic balance. The osmotic balance, which is the proper concentration of dissolved salts inside a cell, is normally regulated by contractile vacuoles like the one seen here. Contractile vacuoles pump excess water out of the cell in order to maintain a healthy internal cellular environment. Another important type of vacuole are food vacuoles. In the case of an amoeba, food vacuoles are formed when pseudopods of cytoplasm surround and engulf food material. Biologists call this process phagocytosis, a word which means cell eating. Digestion occurs inside the food vacuole, nutrients are released, and then absorbed into the cytoplasm where they can be used by the cell. After nutrient absorption is complete, the waste-filled food vacuoles migrate to the cell membrane, and their contents are evacuated into the outer environment. Among the plant-like protists, the most diverse phylum are the green algae, organisms found in great abundance in stagnant water. In the food chains of the natural world, green algae are very important because they are primary food producers and producers of oxygen as well. Although most green algae are single-celled organisms, they quite often live together in groups called cell colonies. In general, colonies of green algae are composed of long threads of hundreds of individual organisms. But the most amazing and beautiful colonies are those of volvox. In these colonies, individual organisms link together to form hollow balls. The members of the colony are able to communicate with one another and can beat their flagella in a highly coordinated way to move the colony in a specific direction. Volvox makes special reproductive cells from which new colonies develop inside of a parent colony. A second phylum of plant-like protists are the golden algae. The delicate organisms called diatoms seen here are the most common members of this group. The cell walls of diatoms contain a glassy material which creates a two-part shell-like casing. Diatoms dwell in both fresh and salt water. In fact, diatoms are the most numerous of the many food and oxygen-producing organisms that float near the ocean's surface. Like bacteria, protists normally reproduce asexually from one parent organism by replicating their DNA and then dividing into two new organisms. Offspring resulting from asexual reproduction possess identical genes. Such organisms are known as clones. However, protists can reproduce sexually as well, a process that involves two parent cells. For example, some green algae engage in conjugation, or joining together by forming a mating tube between two cells through which DNA passes. Because the offspring of sexual reproduction end up with genes from two parents, their ability to survive environmental changes tends to be better than those of the clones that result from asexual reproduction. As we have just seen, the microscopic world teems with a seemingly endless variety of amazing life forms that are very necessary in order to maintain the balance of life on Earth. Protist algae and Moneran blue-green algae are essential in aquatic food chains, where they are major producers of both food and oxygen, while bacteria play an important role as decomposers of dead organisms, thereby releasing vital nutrients back into the environment so they can be used again by living things. True or false? Moneran cells lack a nucleus. True or false? Viruses are not living organisms. True or false? Contractile vacuoles are used for locomotion. True or false? Diatoms are a type of algae. True or false? During conjugation, DNA passes between two cells.